called Harry Revised. It was published in the spring of 2008 in hardcover, and then last year in paperback. And as I mentioned, in a bunch of other places and languages. I was actually going to bring the Spanish version and read it to you, but my Spanish isn't very good. I'm going to read a very short section from chapter 7, and the book sort of pays tribute to the Count of Monte Cristo and Alexandre Dumas and stories like that. And so each chapter has a heading in that style. This chapter heading is "In Which Our Hero Spills Blood." And the only thing you need to know is that my character Harry is a recent widower. His wife has died basically during plastic surgery, for which he may or may not have some responsibility for that turn of events. And he would like to reinvent himself. And the great idea that he has is to pattern himself after Edmond Dantes, the Count of Monte Cristo, who also reinvented himself. And this is the point of the story where he decides that if he's going to pattern himself after the Count of Monte Cristo, it's probably a good idea for him to read the Count of Monte Cristo. And so he's gone to the bookstore to buy a copy, and that is the short section that I will read to you guys. And I don't have my glasses. Abridged or unabridged? That is the question. Harry stands in the deserted, brightly lit fiction and literature section of his favorite chain bookstore, weighing a book in each hand. In his right, the Count of Monte Cristo, Penguin unabridged, weighing in at a formidable 1,276 pages. In his left, the Count of Monte Cristo, Puffin Classics abridged, tipping the scales at a svelte 396 pages. Harry weighs the pros and cons of each literally as well as figuratively. So the other thing about Harry is that his sort of signal trait is he's got this very digressive consciousness, rambling internal monologue, so that helps. He can't deny that an irresistible bit of cachet comes with being an unabridged sort of guy. If depth follows effort, as Harry is reasonably convinced that it must, surely his best hope for a Dantes-esque rebirth must be found in these pages. But Harry also knows himself, knows the limits of his attention span, and fears that the Count of Monte Cristo, Penguin unabridged, is fated to end up as little more than an impressive desk ornament. And, he reasons, if the story can effectively be whittled down to a mere 396 pages, Puffin Classics abridged, then how necessary can the rest really be? Harry's a bit under the gun, eager to move along his grand scheme, and he's not sure he's got time to accommodate what must clearly be 900 pages of authorial self-indulgence. And yet, knowledge is power, and Harry considers the effect of having an additional 900 pages, Penguin unabridged, of power at his beck and call. And what if some essential nugget of wisdom, some brilliant bit of planning is located in that 900 pages somewhere, its value unappreciated by the underpaid junior editor who hacked away to produce the mini-book Puffin Classics abridged? Still, there are practical considerations, transportation, for example. Harry anticipates the inconvenience of hauling around a monster tome, Penguin unabridged, and realizes that the Puffin Classics abridged will fit comfortably in his pocket, his briefcase, and resting on the crest of his belly in bed. To his credit, however, this strikes him as an exceptionally shallow basis on which to choose a book, particularly one with anticipated life-altering effects. What to do? As he always does when faced with seemingly impossible choices, Harry punts the decision. Excuse me, can I ask you a question? Harry addresses the question to the disinterested, scraggly goatee behind the information counter. Despite a balmy summer evening, he wears a knit wool ski cap that just fails to cover a variety of eyebrow piercings. A 1,000-page tome by a fashionable three-name novelist lies open before him, and he annotates it obsessively and lovingly in a tiny crabbed script. Excuse me. Goatee looks up with an expression that suggests that the sanctuary of his private study hour has been intruded upon. The energy of a reply beyond him, he settles for a raised eyebrow, inviting Harry to proceed. Do you think there's a big difference between these? Harry holds up Penguin unabridged and Puffin Classics abridged for inspection. About 900 pages, looks like, Goatee mutters, returning his attention to his literary ablutions. Thank you, that's helpful, Harry thinks, but doesn't say. I was hoping you could tell me a little more. I'm having a hard time deciding. Goatee can scarcely keep the impatience from his face. His eyes flick briefly between the two books. The long one, he says, before lowering his head again. Really? Why do you think? Goatee shrugs and indicates the open volume before him. I like long books. Well, sure, I can see that, but that might not exactly be germane to my situation. Goatee continues to scribble away, exhibiting no interest whatsoever in Harry's situation. The short one, then. Harry looks down at the volume in hand. It's just kind of hard to imagine you can tell a 1,200-page book in a 400-page book, 1,200-page story in a 400-page book, isn't it? Harry's detailed examination of Penguin unabridged prevents him from seeing Goatee sigh, pocket his pencil, close his book, and quit the information kiosk. Only when Harry looks up does he realize he has once again been abandoned. With the resigned shrug that is as familiar to him as his own voice, he opts to purchase both copies. He knows he's likely only to read the shorter one, Puffin Classics Abridged, but he also knows that the day is sure to come when he will find himself inconsolably curious about what has been eluded in the missing 900 pages, and for that day, he'll want Penguin unabridged, close at hand.
Alright, so I had a 21st century moment. I was rushing to get here, and I got in the car with my wife and forgot my book. But my wife had her iPad, so she bought my book and read it.
Oh my God.
And I'm reading up this thing, so I apologize.
And he didn't even get the author discount. That's
No, paid full price. So my book's Attention Deficit Disorder, and this is a section where the main character, Wayne Fencer, is talking about how he imagines worst-case scenarios a lot. He is bereaved and grieving the loss of an ex-girlfriend and has gone out on wandering, essentially. And he has been on the Appalachian Trail. He's been on a road trip with his mentally disabled uncle. He's been a lot of places. So I'll just read a brief bit. I imagined worst-case scenarios a lot. It was a habit of mine, an indulgence. I imagined terrible scenarios for kicks as I moved among the trees, blood and guts, utter horror, demon clowns, roadside psychopaths. I often tried to imagine how I would react if I were involved in a plane crash, for instance. I'd entertain myself for hours, imagining myself sitting in seat 18C, an aisle seat, on a long flight across the Atlantic. Suddenly the cabin pressure would drop and the plane would do a nosedive and flight attendants would stick to the ceiling and hot coffee would fly everywhere and passengers would scream bloody murder. I wondered what I would do. Would I join the chorus? Would I panic? Would I pray? Would I weep? Would I experience a religious conversion? Would time slow down to a supernatural crawl? Would my life really flash before my eyes? Would I, like the survivors of the Golden Gate Bridge, experience a mystical state of consciousness in which I lost all sense of time and space and felt an overriding oneness with humanity, the entire universe, and God? Or would I simply scream bloody murder and soil myself while begging for mercy in the paralyzed recesses of my terrified mind? I like to think I would be serene. Serenity was the fantasy. I like to think that I'd surrender. At that point, there would be no sense fighting it. The end, after all, was the end. I'd like to think that I'd somehow have the presence of mind to reach across the aisle and take the hand of the person next to me, whoever it might be. I like to think that I'd have the presence of mind to say, hey, listen, don't worry, my friend, everything will be all right in the end. I would squeeze their hand tightly, look them directly in the eye, and give them a smile of great warmth. Then to top it off, I'd wink. Not a sexual wink or a politician's wink, but rather a wink of real compassion, a wink of real serenity and real mischief, a wink of confidence and conspiracy, a Frank Sinatra wink, a Cary Grant wink, an Indiana Jones wink, a Morgan Freeman wink, a wink. I had convinced myself that in a moment of such utter finality, this kind of rare serenity would be mistaken for something supernaturally comforting. My incredibly calm presence would be mistaken for angelic intervention. The person seated next to me would die thinking that an angel had just descended from heaven. They'd die thinking that an angel had somehow appeared on the airplane at the moment of their untimely and altogether unpleasant demise, that an angel had smiled, winked, and calmly informed them that everything was going to be quite all right on the other side. In so doing, I would conclude my time on planet Earth in a uniquely altruistic manner, having exhibited the kind of unselfishly heroic presence of mind that we all hope to possess in times of massive crisis. The final moments of my life would be spent responding to my very highest instincts. The final moments of my life would be lived for someone other than myself. A few things that had dawned on me during the course of my adventures. I lived for myself too much. I thought about myself too much. I thought about everything too much. That was what I was doing out there in the wilderness, thinking about everything too much. I was walking through thick forest day after day, with my mind running out of control. I walked through the mud in a tunnel of green. I couldn't even see the sky. I was buried by forest, thinking about what I was thinking about. It was what I did for a living. I did it 18 hours a day.